I've mentioned that there's no one size fits all approach with this work. There's various models, different bits and pieces. So particularly today, I'm really glad to be joined by our next speaker. It's Russell Teale, who's the co-founder of Managing Director for Vivify Venues. And he's here to talk through some local examples of how opening up the school in the evenings and weekends can have great impact on local community and also the admissions.
So thank you very much. Yeah, my name's Russell. I'm co-founder and managing director of Vivify. So I've worked with probably around about 500 schools across the UK. So pretty much know all the kind of ins and outs and challenges that schools face on a daily basis. And a lot of it, has been touched on and covered today, but really wanted to kind of focus around, the challenges that we're facing at the minute, particularly as a country, in a kind of wider environment. But then the role that schools can place, some of the stats have been teased out already, but hopefully kind of hit home from here. So yeah, you can just go through the slides. So in terms of the problem itself, estimated over 400 gyms and pools and leisure centres have already been lost. And then, UK Active as recently as March have said that, a further 39% of facilities are at risk of permanent closure. And the impact that can have obviously is hugely significant. And then it should be no surprise, and I know it was talked about before from Mark, that 68% of groups are finding it even harder to access these facilities. And therefore, take that an even step further, there's an extra 3.4 million people classed as inactive. So you can only imagine the kind of impact that has, and then also kind of anxiety levels doubling. So when we think about the problem and then therefore the impact that has, it's absolutely significant in terms of, the UK population as a whole. Next slide. Thank you. So when we think about the impact then of all those things, we can already see already, 1 in 3 children finishing primary school either overweight or obese. 96% of children in the UK aged 7 to 11 not having those fundamental skills to be able to stay safe in the water. Swimming is such a life skill. And then this is the most kind of stark and astounding one. 90% of young people said that loneliness made their mental health worse during the pandemic. So yeah, when we look at that, it's then looking at, well, how can schools play an impact in that? How can they help? So yeah, just go on to the next slide. So how can schools help that? So the impact of a fantastic community lettings program can have a huge impact on the school. We've talked a lot about today about, it's the challenge for the school. It might be difficult to do that, but we've seen some amazing, genuinely fantastic case studies where schools might have actually struggled from a reputational standpoint. They might have had in the past quite a difficult Ofsted report that's come out, but by opening up the school facilities, putting a huge focus on primary age children, they've seen a significant increase in admissions just based on that reputation of the school alone. So by focusing on primary age, by doing things like what we've talked about today, like footy tots, if you're lucky to have a swimming pool, we've got a school that we support up in kind of West Yorkshire where they were at 50% capacity. Even though the school had changed its name to try and do that, suddenly just opening up the doors meant that they started to see that their school became almost like a destination for their local community. And therefore admissions really started to ramp up, and that's increased year on year. If you think about the next person being the school business manager, got to be one of the most underrated and most difficult jobs, I think, in the UK, responsible for anything from cleaning contracts to recruitment, all the way through to stationery orders. And then one of the biggest ones that they're being challenged and faced with every single day now is actually coming up with additional revenue for the school. And so, for them to actually think about opening up school facilities to add another task that they've got to do on a daily basis is extremely difficult. And then we think about the pupils themselves, by actually running a successful community lettings program. Again, it's been touched on today already, just the wholeheartedly experience that you can put on for them. And I think, as Mark said at Astley, by actually tailoring that approach to something that they can particularly do as an extracurricular activity, and it doesn't always have to be sport. It can be anything like theatre and drama and dance, things that are genuinely going to enable them to overcome some of the kind of challenges that they face on a daily basis, thinking about kind of wider leadership skills and confidence and those sorts of things. So it can have a massive impact on the pupils. But also the lead hirer, I think, they're often missed out, and it's great today to kind of giving them a voice when we're talking about it. But those lead hirers, a lot of them are volunteers and also run their own small businesses. So this enables them to massively have an impact in kind of their local community and actually be able to bring something, certainly a professional experience for the wider community. But then also that leads on to the next point, which are the actual participants themselves. So, we can see, as an example, one of the schools that we use has over 80,000 participants every single year. So we try and take a step back and think about the impact that that can have. It really is phenomenal and have a massive impact on both kind of physical and social well-being. And then you always think about the participants, but never think about the spectators. So you go down to Marple Hall School in Stockport on a Saturday morning, and there are at least 400 or 500 different types of children and adults taking part in physical and social activity. But there's also the parents, the grandparents, and again, never underestimate the power of them getting outdoors. And particularly grandparents, it may be one of the only 2 or 3 occasions that they step foot outside their house, as an example. So the impact that that can have on them is never unnoticed. And then we think about the actual wider scale of the families, and then the next point being just the kind of where can we take it from that perspective. So families hugely important in that whole model, and then onto the community itself. And then if you kind of add all that up together and you can start to think about 30,000 schools in the UK, the impact that that will have on the NHS itself is absolutely huge. We can see from the stats already that physical inactivity, mental health and loneliness cost the UK economy, particularly the NHS, around about £7 billion a year. So by adding all of this up, think about that first stat with regards to leisure and particularly leisure facilities that were under pressure as a result of COVID. Schools have remained open throughout that entire process. So just by opening those school gates can have a significant impact on each of these individual ones. And that's it. We'll go to the next slide. But I think this is where the experience comes in from my perspective. And again, a few of them have been touched on today. Every school that we speak to, there are the barriers, and they're not to be underestimated. The staff that work in schools are already stretched, particularly whether that's the site team, whether that's the school business manager, whether that's the finance assistant, whether it's the teaching assistants themselves. To have the time to market the facilities or work out how they're going to take payments or have some sort of technology to enable them to actually open and close their facilities, not to mention the whole health and safety risks. And then the key point being the last one, which every school is obviously nervous about, are the safeguarding. So, in terms of where we've seen some amazing success is the first point being community groups. So we've seen schools that don't necessarily have to go to a third party. They don't have to go and, employ, an external company or somebody to do that. Just by actually engaging with your local community groups is an amazing opportunity to help support you. So we've seen where there's been junior football clubs as an example. They are, respected, trusted members of the community that are all DBS checked. So by, working with them, we've seen it where we've got to the point where the school are comfortable to provide them with a key to open the padlock to the 3G pitch as an example, and trust them to close it for, at the end of the evening as well. I said, we've seen that tried and tested all over the UK. But then also booking systems. There's lots of bits of technology out there now that's very, very affordable, as little as kind of £50 a month, that enable the schools to kind of take away some of these points around payments and marketing and technology, just by actually providing the community with access to book something similar to, how easy it is to book a holiday or a hotel. And then in terms of other ways of doing it, where we've seen it work really well is teaching assistants. Teaching assistants are on term-time only contracts a lot of the time. And, schools are already challenged from a budget perspective. So to enable them to earn additional income outside of hours by opening up and closing the facilities, it allows the school to generate additional income. And from what we've seen, a lot of the schools that we work with generate in excess of £100,000 a year. So when you start to do the kind of the maths on it and the budgets around that, by utilising teaching assistants, it ticks a huge box for them in terms of giving them additional hours, but it also enables the school to make some additional money. And of course, there are third-party companies. And again, I think Mark at Sporting made a great point in there. I think the challenge with third-party companies, and I've been one of them, is that finding that balance. The schools a lot of the time are focused, and understandably so, on revenue, but it's about having that kind of balance to make sure that you're not excluding the local community groups, particularly kind of the volunteer-led where they haven't got any money. So finding that balance in your community lettings program to make sure that you still provide access to local grassroots teams is significantly important. On to the next one. Yep, so thank you. So, I mean, what I wanted to do was just kind of finish really on talking about a bit of a case study. So, as I said before, I've worked with over 500 schools. Vivify works with over 70 schools, particularly in around the Northwest as well. And so one school that I wanted to kind of bring to life was Marple Hall. So Marple Hall School in Stockport Secondary School, fantastic school. And I can't take the credit at all. The likes of Claire, who's been there in the PE department, kind of working on this for 15, 16 years, along with Lisa, who's the kind of school business manager, and Pete, the site team. They've developed a phenomenal community lettings program. And again, some of these pictures just kind of bring it to life in terms of young people. You've got choir groups, you've got, you know, sweaty mamas, you've got up in the top right hand corner the Dogs Trust, the majorettes. You know, there really is a kind of plethora of opportunities just by literally opening your school gates and letting people know, you know, particularly through some of the kind of parent apps and various communication tools with parents. You know, Marple Hall's got around about 1,600 people, so therefore by definition over kind of 1,600 parents who have got, you know, so their ability to market was pretty easy just by using their internal link. So if we just click through some of the ones on this particular page, and then there should be 3 more spots, sorry. Yeah, so Marple Hall effectively, by opening up their school facilities, have got 113 different hiring groups, of which a multitude of them are junior football clubs, but there's also things like, you know, Marple Racketeers, which have been going since for over 50 years, which are, you know, over 70s kind of badminton group, all the way through to, you know, the Sweaty Mamas and various other groups. But I think some of the other astounding facts are that they actually operate over 80,000 hours of physical and social activities every single year, which is just unbelievable. And using Sport England's kind of stat that every £1 that's invested into, you know, leisure generates over £3.91 of social value. Just what Marple Hall School do alone is over £500,000 worth of social value back into the local community. I live in Marple Bridge myself, so I can see it, I can feel it. So back to the NHS and the impact that it can have on waiting lists or mental health provisions or anything else. You know, Marple Hall is an unbelievable and fantastic kind of case study and example of a school that really has invested in opening up their school facilities and therefore enabling us to kind of bring to life the stats and around what it is that they're doing. And then the final point, which is the final slide, is around funding. So again, we've touched on it today, but one of the kind of successes that we've seen is the Fast Track Fund. So it's available to all schools and enables them to pay for facilities over a period of time. So similar to the example before with Astley, where they got some match funding and work with Football Foundation, the Fast Track Fund is very similar. And again, you know, you'd be very surprised, you know, a new 3G pitch or a new playground or multi-use games area obviously is eminently doable just by opening up those doors. There's, you know, there's thousands upon thousands of junior football clubs that are absolutely desperate to, you know, make bookings at your school just by saying yes to it. We've also got the School Pool Legacy Fund. So we work with Olympic athletes Beck Edlington, Steve Parry. They've put together £1 million fund for schools to invest in school facilities. You know, 1 in 3 pools again have still not opened as a result of the pandemic. So they've put together £1 million to invest in school facilities. So if you know a school in your local area that needs some investment, there's no strings attached. It's just £1 million there to make sure that those pools stay open. So we're running kind of Join the Movement campaign with themselves. Obviously, there's the OSF, which has recently happened. And then also just, you know, being able to articulate like Marple Hall have done has enabled them to build a brand new multi-use games area and a 3G pitch by just being able to demonstrate the level of participation that takes place. So there's regular funds and bids from Sport England and local councils that take place. And so just by having that data to hand and being able to articulate what it is that you're able to do, you know, undoubtedly will have a massive kind of tick when it comes to actually winning those bids and the funds for that. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Russell, and thanks, Beth, for stepping in for the slides there.
Thank you.
Russell, we're really glad that you could join us today, and I think if anyone's not had a look at Vivify Venues, Russell's contact details will be shared. Again, follow him on social media. There's so much learning to be taken from your expertise within that field. And Russell, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you.